In the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where the soil is rich and traditions run deep, courthouse records from the mid-19th century list 4 separate, tragic deaths. An attorney, his life cut short by a fall from his horse on a misty morning. A prosperous banker, found lifeless in the shallow, frigid waters of Mill Creek. A respected circuit judge, succumbing to a sudden, violent illness during the golden harvest season. And a county sheriff, his body discovered at the bottom of his own well. On paper, they are unconnected misfortunes, the grim realities of life in a time before modern medicine and safety. But what these sterile records fail to reveal is a thread of connection so dark, so chilling, it would remain buried for nearly 100 years. All 4 of these prominent men were married to sisters from the same formidable Irish Catholic family. And each of their untimely deaths occurred within 18 months of their wedding day. The Brennan sisters, Bridget, Catherine, Margaret, and Sarah, had inherited the largest, most coveted farm in all of Lancaster County, and they would spill blood again and again to keep it whole. The story of the Brennan family farm, and the 4 widows who refused to be broken apart, truly begins in the summer of 1836. This was the summer everything changed, the summer when a hushed conversation by flickering candlelight sealed the fates of 4 unsuspecting men. The Brennan farm was not just land, it was an 847-acre kingdom of Pennsylvania's most fertile soil, a dynasty carved from the earth by their father, Patrick Brennan. He had arrived from County Cork with nothing but the fire of determination in his belly, and a deep-seated hatred for the English landlords who had dispossessed his own family. For 37 years, he had poured his sweat and soul into this American dream. By 1836, his property was a marvel, boasting a grand stone house that could rival any in Philadelphia, colossal barns that sheltered 200 head of cattle, and grain silos that were a bulwark against the harshest winters for half the county. But that October, Patrick Brennan died, leaving behind a problem that would have shattered a lesser family. The unyielding statutes of Pennsylvania law dictated that a man's property must be divided equally among his children. Patrick had no sons. His 4 daughters, Bridget, 28, Catherine, 26, Margaret, 24, and the youngest, Sarah, at 21, were faced with the horrifying prospect of watching their father's life's work being carved into worthless parcels, auctioned off piece by piece to satisfy the insatiable demands of creditors and tax collectors. This was a nightmare they had been raised to fear. Patrick had ingrained in them the sacredness of the land, his voice, still thick with the accent of his homeland, weaving tales of their grandfather's eviction from Irish soil. He spoke of families scattered like chaff in the wind when their connection to the land was severed. "Land is not just dirt and stones," he would thunder, his eyes blazing with conviction. "Land is your blood, your future, your very soul. Lose the land, and you lose everything that makes you who you are." In Lancaster County, a place settled by German and Irish farmers who understood this sacred bond, such words carried immense weight. But understanding the importance of keeping the land and possessing the means to do so were 2 very different challenges. The Brennan sisters, however, were not ordinary farm women. Bridget, the eldest, possessed a razor-sharp intellect she had learned to veil behind demure smiles and downcast eyes. She could calculate compound interest with the speed of a seasoned banker, and had been secretly managing the farm's complex finances since her father's eyesight began to fail. Catherine had her father's uncanny gift for reading people, for sensing their hidden weaknesses and deepest desires with an almost supernatural intuition. Margaret was blessed with an ethereal beauty that could make a man forget his own name, a divine gift she paired with a ruthless pragmatism her angelic face perfectly concealed. And Sarah, the youngest, had a voice that could charm birds from the trees and an actress's talent for flawlessly playing whatever role a situation demanded. Together, they would forge a conspiracy of survival that would become a dark legend in Lancaster County. In the long, sorrowful nights after their father's funeral, as they huddled in the stone kitchen, the fire casting dancing, monstrous shadows on the walls, their plan began to form. The property taxes alone would bleed their savings dry within 2 years. Marriage, the traditional salvation for women of their station, was a sentence of separation. Different households, different names, different loyalties. But what if marriage could be twisted to serve their purpose, rather than destroy it? "We stay together," Bridget declared one bitter November evening, frost etching delicate ferns on the windowpanes. Whatever it takes. We stay together, and we keep this farm whole. The law says differently, Margaret countered, ever the realist. Catherine's voice was a slow, deliberate whisper. The law can be influenced. It was Sarah, the sweet, charming Sarah, who finally spoke the words that would damn them all to hell. Men die, sisters. Husbands die. And widows inherit everything. The first death came on March 15, 1838, a mere 6 months after Bridget's grand wedding to Thomas Hennessy, the most respected attorney in Lancaster County. Hennessy had been a logical, almost perfect choice. A successful Irish Catholic lawyer in his early 40s, a widower with no children, wealthy enough to settle the Brennan property taxes without a second thought, and influential enough to help legally restructure the family's assets. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Hennessy, lonely for 3 years since his first wife succumbed to consumption, was utterly captivated by Bridget's rare combination of beauty and intellect. She could debate legal precedents with the same effortless grace she planned elaborate dinner parties. Within 2 months of meeting at Sunday Mass, he was convinced she was the answer to his prayers. Their wedding in December 1837 was a lavish affair, announcing to all of Lancaster County that the Brennan fortunes were secure. Hennessy moved into the stone farmhouse, his wealth and legal mind working to create a complex family trust that kept the land intact while providing for each sister. But Thomas Hennessy had tragically underestimated his new wife's true loyalties. Within weeks, disturbing patterns emerged. Bridget seemed pathologically focused on her sister's welfare, far more than on their new marriage. She insisted her sisters remain in the main house, transforming what should have been an intimate honeymoon into a crowded, tense family gathering. When Hennessy gently suggested that newlyweds might benefit from some privacy, Bridget's response was a blade of ice. "My sisters are my blood, Thomas. They stay." The tension coiled tighter when he discovered Bridget using his legal connections to investigate the finances of several prominent local bachelors. She claimed she was merely looking out for her sisters' futures, but Hennessy sensed a cold, calculating purpose in her actions. The morning of March 15th began with a terrible argument. Hennessy had received a lucrative offer to purchase a law practice in Philadelphia, a career-defining opportunity. When he presented the idea to Bridget over breakfast, her reaction was immediate and venomous. "We're not leaving," she stated flatly, her eyes fixed on her porridge. "This is our future, Bridget. A chance to build something." "Our future is here," she interrupted, her voice dangerously low. "This land. This farm. My sisters. Your sisters can visit. They can live with us once they're married." Bridget finally looked up, and Hennessy would later tell his law clerk that the expression in her eyes had genuinely frightened him. "You don't understand, do you, Thomas? We don't leave. We don't separate. Ever." The argument raged as he prepared for his ride to Lancaster town. A dense, chilling fog clung to the land, muffling sound and turning familiar landmarks into ghostly shapes. Neighbors later recalled hearing raised voices, the words lost in the oppressive mist. At approximately 9:30 that morning, Thomas Hennessy's horse galloped back to the farmhouse, riderless. The animal was slick with sweat, its eyes wide with a terror that seemed almost human. Bridget, her face a mask of distress, immediately organized a search party. They found his body 3 hours later, sprawled beside the road, his neck broken in what appeared to be a catastrophic fall. The county coroner, Dr. James Mallister, concluded the injuries were consistent with being thrown from a horse. The fog would have made the road treacherous. Yet, troubling details lingered. Hennessy was a masterful horseman. The horse's extreme agitation seemed disproportionate to a simple stumble. Most disturbingly, Bridget, while appearing to grieve, seemed laser-focused on the practicalities, securing the will, consolidating his assets, and ensuring the legal protections for the farm remained ironclad. She played the grieving widow to perfection, but those closest to the family saw that her sisters were not mourners. They were soldiers standing guard over a commander who had successfully completed a difficult mission. Within a month, the pattern began anew. Sarah Brennan started accepting social invitations from Hamilton Crawford, the wealthiest banker in the county. Crawford was a practical man in his late 30s, a widower who had buried himself in his work for 3 lonely years. Catherine approached him with an irresistible blend of vulnerability and strength. She would visit his bank, ostensibly to discuss the family's finances, but their conversations always drifted. "I worry so about my sisters," she would confide, her voice laced with the perfect measure of concern. "A woman alone in this world, it's so dangerous." Crawford, an only child, was deeply moved by her devotion. Their engagement was announced in August 1838. The wedding took place in October, exactly 1 year after Patrick Brennan's death. Like Hennessy before him, Crawford moved into the farmhouse and used his financial expertise to further secure the Brennan estate. But Hamilton Crawford was a banker, a man trained to see patterns others missed, and his instincts screamed that something was wrong. He began keeping a private journal. November 3, 1838. Catherine insists on separate accounts. Margaret shows no interest in suitors, and Sarah actively discourages them. "I begin to suspect they have no intention of ever leaving this house." November 18, 1838. Bridget's knowledge of property law and inheritance is staggering. She asked questions today about widows' rights in cases of intestate death. She called it academic curiosity, but her eyes were like chips of flint. December 15, 1838. Catherine has become distant, her affection mechanical. "I mentioned starting our own family. Her reaction was hostile. 'The 4 of us are family enough,' she said. The words chilled me to the bone." Crawford's dread deepened when he learned Margaret was receiving regular visits from Judge Cornelius Whitman, the powerful circuit judge who would preside over any legal challenge to the Brennan estate. The banker recognized the emerging pattern, but he made a fatal error. He assumed recognizing the conspiracy was enough to protect him from it. The second death occurred on February 8, 1839, during a winter so cold that Mill Creek, which bordered the property, had frozen solid. Crawford's body was found by a neighbor, apparently having fallen through the ice while inspecting the farm's boundaries. Death by drowning and exposure. A tragic, plausible accident. But Crawford's journal, hidden in his bank safe, told a different story. The final entry, dated the day before his death, was a desperate plea from the grave. Catherine knows, I suspect. Her concern feels more like surveillance. I have decided to confront her tomorrow about my suspicions regarding Thomas Hennessy's death. If something should happen to me, look to the sisters. They are not what they seem. Dr. Mallister's examination found nothing to contradict the story of an accident. Catherine's grief was as convincing as Bridget's had been. But the pattern was now undeniable to anyone willing to see. 6 weeks after Hamilton Crawford's funeral, Margaret Brennan's engagement to Judge Cornelius Whitman was announced. Judge Whitman, 53 and a respected widower, was the pinnacle of Lancaster society. Margaret's courtship of him was a masterclass in manipulation. She approached him not as a suitor, but as a vulnerable young woman seeking legal advice, her stunning beauty secondary to her apparent innocence. "My sisters and I simply want to honor our father's wishes, Your Honor," she would say, her blue eyes wide with confusion. "But the law seems designed to destroy families." Whitman, weary of greedy heirs, was charmed by her loyalty. He gradually found himself confiding in her, sharing his loneliness, never suspecting he was being meticulously groomed. Their engagement in May 1839 sent shockwaves through the community. The whispers grew louder. How could one family be so lucky in inheritance, and so cursed in love? But Margaret, it seemed, shared these concerns. "I worry about my sisters," she confided to Whitman before their wedding, her voice trembling. "They've been different since their husbands died. More secretive. Sometimes I feel like they're planning something." It was a brilliant move, positioning herself as another potential victim, using the judge's own suspicions to absolve herself of guilt. The wedding was in July. Like the others, Whitman moved into the farmhouse. But as a judge, his powers of observation were sharper. His private notes, discovered years later, chart a man's growing certainty that he had married into a nest of vipers. August 10, 1839. Margaret insists on knowing my schedule in advance. Her questions seem focused on when I will be traveling alone. September 2nd, 1839. Found Margaret examining my will. She claimed to be trying to understand legal terminology, but her questions were unervingly sophisticated. September 15th, 1839. I confronted her directly. Her response was immediate tears, protests of innocence. But her performance felt rehearsed. She is either their victim, or a far better actress than I ever imagined. Whitman quietly began his own investigation, discovering that both Hennessy and Crawford had been in conflict with their wives about leaving Lancaster County just before their deaths. He also learned of a private investigator, Daniel Murphy, who had been making inquiries, supposedly on behalf of concerned parties. But before Whitman could contact him, Murphy vanished. On October 30th, 1839, the judge made his move. He confronted Margaret in the parlor while her sisters were away, his voice echoing with courtroom authority. I know what your sisters have done. The question now is whether you are their accomplice or their next victim. Margaret's composure shattered. She collapsed into a chair, her face ashen, her hands trembling. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain lashing against the windows. Then, a whisper. I've been praying someone would stop them. Before they make me do what they did. A torrent of confession followed, revealing the full, monstrous scope of the conspiracy. It was all Bridget's design, born in those candlelit nights of grief. 4 strategic marriages, 4 convenient deaths, 1 financial empire. Bridget said we had to think like men, Margaret wept, her voice gaining a desperate strength. Men use violence and politics. Women have to be smarter. She said no one would ever suspect us, because people see what they expect to see, grieving widows, not calculating killers. The details were sickeningly precise. Bridget had drugged Hennessy's coffee to make him dizzy, then spooked his horse with a perfectly aimed stone. Catherine had spent weeks studying the ice on Mill Creek, even using heated irons to weaken a specific spot, creating a natural-looking trap. She had to hold his head under the water, Margaret choked out, tears streaming down her face. The cold made him too weak to fight. Her own role, she claimed, was one of coerced compliance. They had threatened to frame her for the first 2 murders if she refused to play her part. But the most chilling revelation was yet to come. Judge Whitman's own death was already planned. November 15th. Poison. A slow-acting toxin mimicking a heart attack. Sarah has been practicing the dosage, Margaret whispered in horror. On stray animals. Bridget said your death had to be perfect. You're too prominent for another accident. As Margaret spoke, she revealed another layer of the plot. Daniel Murphy, the investigator, was working for them, hired to identify anyone who grew too suspicious. Whitman's own investigation had been reported back to the sisters. How do I know you're telling the truth now? He demanded, the horrifying possibility that this too was a performance chilling him to the core. In response, Margaret walked to a desk, unlocked a drawer with a key from around her neck, and produced a leather-bound journal. This is everything, she said, her hands shaking as she placed it in his. Every detail, every plan. I've been documenting it all, praying that someday I would need proof. As Whitman's eyes scanned the first damning entry, the sound of approaching horses broke the night's stillness. Catherine and Sarah were returning. They can't know I've told you, Margaret whispered, her eyes wide with terror. If they suspect, they will kill you tonight. The journal was a testament to meticulous evil. The first entry, dated 1 month after their father's death, laid bare the cold logic of their pact. Bridget says we are not murderers. We are survivors, using the only weapons available to women in a world designed to destroy us. Subsequent entries were a descent into madness. March 16, 1838. Thomas is dead. Bridget shows no more emotion than if she had slaughtered a chicken for dinner. I think my sister may be genuinely mad, but I am too frightened to resist. The journal detailed how each sister's personality had been weaponized. Bridget the mastermind, Catherine the manipulator, Sarah the deceptively sweet executioner, and Margaret the reluctant accomplice, her apparent innocence serving as the perfect alibi. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Whitman read a passage detailing his own murder, scheduled for 2 weeks from that day. Sarah had perfected the dosage of foxglove extract. 3 drops in his evening brandy. The door creaked open. "Cornelius, Margaret," Catherine called out cheerfully from the entryway. "You'll never guess what we discovered in town." As she entered the parlor, her smile was radiant and predatory. "It seems Mrs. Henderson at the dry goods store has been spreading rumors about our family's extraordinary luck." Sarah followed with a tea service, her laughter musical and chillingly innocent. She suggested we Brennan women possess some sort of supernatural charm. If only she knew. The casual cruelty in their voices was paralyzing. Margaret's hand found his under the table, her grip desperate. "I told her," Catherine said, settling into a chair, "that we Brennan women have always understood the importance of taking care of the men we love. We make sure they never have to worry about growing old and burdensome." It was a confession, veiled in a threat. "In fact," Sarah added, her eyes glinting, "a gentleman from Philadelphia has been asking about our family. A federal investigator. He seems very interested in cases where young widows inherit substantial fortunes." The blood drained from Whitman's face. The timeline had just been violently accelerated. Bridget's voice called from the kitchen, summoning her sisters. The moment they were gone, Margaret's frantic whisper confirmed his fears. "They're going to kill you tonight. The federal investigation has forced their hand." "How do I know this isn't the final performance?" he demanded. For an answer, she reached into her dress and produced a small glass vial filled with a clear liquid. "This is the foxglove. I was supposed to put it in your brandy tonight." She pressed it into his palm. "The fact that I'm giving it to you should prove where my loyalties now lie." She then revealed the final piece of the puzzle, a second set of records, Bridget's financial ledgers detailing their stolen empire, hidden behind a false panel in their father's desk in the cellar. Just as they resolved to escape, Sarah's sweet voice called from the kitchen. "Margaret, dear, could you and Cornelius join us? Bridget has something important to discuss." It was a summons they could not refuse. As they stood, paralyzed by the choice before them, the sound of multiple horses thundering toward the farmhouse cut through the night. Torches flared in the darkness, a small army moving with purpose. "Federal marshals," Margaret breathed. From the kitchen came a flurry of frantic activity. Bridget appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of cold fury. "Before those men reach the house, we will agree on our story." "I think not," Whitman replied, stepping between her and Margaret. "We will tell them the truth." Bridget's mask fell away, revealing the monster beneath. "You sanctimonious fool. Did you really think we operated without protection? The men riding toward this house aren't here to arrest us. They're here to arrest you." Before he could process the staggering implication, a fist pounded on the door. "Federal marshals, open up." 6 armed men stormed into the room. Their leader, Marshal William Davies, fixed his gaze on the judge. "Judge Cornelius Whitman, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud." The sisters' trap had sprung. They had framed him. But as Margaret stepped forward, tears of genuine anguish on her face, ready to confess, Marshal Davies cut her off. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, his voice hard as iron, "we have already received detailed testimony from a private investigator named Daniel Murphy." Hope flared in Margaret's eyes as panic flashed across her sisters' faces. "He also provided us with physical evidence," the marshal continued. "Poison vials, forged documents, and correspondence outlining the entire conspiracy." "Murphy was supposed to destroy that," Sarah blurted out, the admission hanging in the air like a death sentence. "Furthermore," Davies concluded, a flicker of a smile on his lips, "we have sworn testimony from Judge Whitman himself, provided through intermediaries over the past several weeks." Whitman stared in confusion, until he met Margaret's gaze. She had been secretly feeding information to the authorities all along, playing the most dangerous game of her life. "The journal," she said, producing the book. "Everything is here." As shackles were snapped onto Bridget's wrists, her final words revealed the terrifying depth of her delusion. "We were merciful killers. History will remember us as women who refused to be victims." The three sisters were convicted and hanged together on March 15, 1841, 3 years to the day after their first murder. Margaret, granted immunity, vanished with her husband into a new life in Ohio. The Brennan farm, a monument to their evil, was sold off and eventually demolished. Their story became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder that the most monstrous evil can hide behind the most familiar faces, and that the deadliest criminals are often the ones society is least prepared to suspect. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed, or might there have been other victims we never discovered? Leave your comment below with your theories. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark heart of history, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this with someone who loves a mystery that will keep them up at night. The darkness holds many secrets, and we're here to uncover them all. See you in the next video.